Amen. We're ready to go. Good morning, everyone. How are you today?
Good.
I'm going to call the Real Estate and Transportation Committee meeting to order. We have a full quorum. All of our members are here. Commissioner Walker, Commissioner Franklin, and all of the rest of our commissioners. I see our staff is here. So we're ready to go. We have two orders of business today. Number one, a land lease agreement with Doherty Holding 18 LLC. The second one is addendum to a lease agreement between the CRA and Haas Management LLC at 820 and 830 North Massachusetts Avenue. Ramona, would you be presenting this today?
Yes, I'm going to take the first item. That's a land lease agreement with Doherty Holdings 18th LLC. This particular lessee is seeking to lease a portion of the airport, a 1 acre parcel of land. They are wanting to build a hangar for use for maintenance and storage of their own aircraft on the property. The effective date of the lease would be September 1st, 2020. This is a 30-year lease with 2 additional 10-year renewal options. The effective date of the lease would be 12 months from that September 1st, 2020 date in terms of payment of annual rent payments or issuance of a certificate of occupancy once the hangar is constructed. The annual base rent is $10,890, which will be paid in monthly installments. Each at the end of each 5-year period, that base rent will be adjusted in accordance with the CPI index. And then in year 20 of the lease, and then for each 10-year renewal thereafter, the rent will be adjusted based on the higher of the CPI or 10% of an appraisal conducted the value of the unimproved land. Pursuant to the lease, Doherty will be responsible for all ad valorem tax or special assessments. And in addition, any improvements done to the land will become the property of the airport or the city upon expiration of the lease term. And in addition, Doherty will also be constructing at their own cost an access road to access their facility, their hangar, which they'll construct.
Thank you. Do I have any questions? I see Gene Conrad's online here as well. Do I hear any questions from any of our Commissioner Walker?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The access road, Mr. Conrad, and briefly looking through that material, I got a question. Is it just for that particular company's use, or can you explain a little better for me? Is private, or could there be other connectivity for other particular property owners, or those that may be on the property of the airport?
Great question. So this would only be for the use of this individual hangar. There's another hangar, if you look at the diagram, to the, I guess, left of what they're going to build, and we would run an access road up that side because we have another hangar next to the future development that we own that we would want to connect in the future. So we would just run a road up the other side, which is already reflected in our master plan. So this road would only connect to that one hangar.
And as you just indicated, the other one that we would have, or we would be putting in, would be access for the new tenant that will come for that particular location, or again?
For the new hangar, if you look there, you can see there's another blue square. That would be a future hangar in that location. And then there's another existing hangar right next to that location as well. And we would build a road to access both of those properties in the future, separate from what's being constructed here for that Doherty's going to do.
Okay, yeah, I understand now. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep.
Thank you, Phil. That was going to be a question I asked. That you beat me to it, but I was trying to figure out where that second ramp going off to the left, or I guess Gene calls it to the west. Commissioner Franklin, do you have any questions?
I think that looks pretty straightforward. I do, after we vote on this, I do have a question though, Gene, on something else regarding the tenants, but I think this looks good.
Will anybody enter? I would like to entertain a motion. Commissioner Franklin is going to motion, and I presume Commissioner Walker will second it. Hearing any other discussion from anyone else? I presume there is none. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand, saying aye. That passed unanimously. Ramona, let's do number 2.
Jared Simpson, our office, is going to introduce number 2, the lease addendum to the lease agreement with House Management, and Elise also has a short presentation for you on that as well.
Well, before you move forward, Commissioner Reed, I think Commissioner Franklin had another question regarding the airport.
I was trying to do that, but I'm sorry. Go ahead, Scott. Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't know Gene was about to bolt, so I did have a quick question. Reading the stuff across the news this week about a potential charter service that's looking at Plant City or Lakeland, is there anything you can enlighten us with, or is that all sort of exploratory?
I will enlighten you with what I know. I didn't know anything about it until LAL today called me and asked me about it. So that's all I got.
Very well.
All right, Ramona, we're ready for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's actually going to be me. I'm Jared Simpson. I'm the new Assistant City Attorney, and this will be the first item that I have the pleasure of presenting to you all. So I just want to say at the start here that I'm really excited to be working at Lakeland. It's a fantastic organization and a beautiful city. And so far, even in light of all the things that are happening in the world, it's been really exciting and fun to come to work every day because the people are so great. So I just want to say that in the beginning. And I feel honored and privileged. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So you have here an addendum to an existing lease that was approved back in May of 2016 by the CRA with House Management LLC. It's an event space called House 820. It's also a collaborative office space called The Collective. Since 2016, quite a few businesses have opened up in this area that's created a need to reconfigure the parking allocations. And so this addendum is the result of negotiations with House Management to reconfigure the parking and work out a few other items. The addendum was approved by the CRA Advisory Board on June 4 by a vote of 10-1. And essentially the addendum adjusts the parking allocations. It provides for temporary valet while the new parking lot is being constructed. It clarifies the initial start date of the lease, and it allows for rent increases at each renewal period. It also allows the CRA to pass through maintenance and property taxes to the tenant. In exchange for that, the CRA does agree to build a partition wall between House and Artifact, which is estimated to cost around $25,000. The CRA will also provide a loan to the tenant in order to construct certain leasehold improvements. That loan will be for $75,000 at a 0% interest rate, and repayment of it will begin next year, at the beginning of next year, and it will be rolled into the rent. If the tenant terminates the lease, then the loan becomes due in full at that time. And the tenant is also going to be eligible for $10,000 of that loan to be forgiven should they invest in irrigation improvements in the courtyard. And Elise Drumgo from the CRA is here to give you more detail on this agreement.
Good morning, everyone. If you would, I do have a presentation here. If you would make me the presenter.
Okay, Elise, you have the presentation rights.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right. As the Assistant City Attorney mentioned, this addendum really is going relative to the lease that was approved in 2016. So these properties were acquired as a component of Mass Market. You see here we have Ashton Events, which operates in the Collective, and then House 820, which is the event space. This lease commenced for both of those properties in June of 2017. With the addition of the food truck park, which has become the Yard on Mass, which sits on the southeast corner of Parker and Massachusetts Avenue, we saw the need to readjust the parking allocations, and at the time, House 820 here was utilizing the full brunt of this space, and within the lease, it called for a shared parking agreement. And so in looking at this, we realized that it would be very difficult for a 7,500 square foot event venue to share parking with a food truck park, given the amount of traffic that both businesses have. So what we wanted to do was adopt the shared parking agreement, which was the provision in the original lease, and then also to have a lease addendum to clear up some other items that kind of surfaced with some operational changes that occurred. So what I'll do is I'll take you through the individual changes to the addendum so that we kind of touch on these one by one. We just keep in mind, please, that at our May advisory board meeting, the board initially tabled our first go at the addendum with a 6-2 vote, just because there were some reservations about one of the components of the lease that I'll dive into. But at the June meeting, the board voted 10-1 in favor of moving this lease addendum forward. Here's the parking layout that gives you a real snapshot of how we had to make the adjustment. So originally we started out with a lot 1 here, again, which is south of House 820 and to the west of Yard on Mass. And so this was the only lot we had. CRA acquired what we call Lot 2 now in 2018, and we've since improved this parking area. And so our goal is to correct our parking woes by shifting House 820's parking over to what we will consider Lot 2. Again, the Lot 3 that Jared mentioned will be constructed ultimately and will be shared by all tenants. And then getting into the nuts and bolts of what the real changes are verbiage-wise in the lease addendum. Originally, there was some lease space that was not included. So we've had about 7,200 square feet of interior event space that is house and 4,800 square feet of the office space, which is the collective. Well, the tenant would like to add an exterior courtyard to that lease space as well. One of the things that we negotiated in to adjust is the initial commencement date of the lease term. So this would shift out the commencement date from June of 2017 to August of 2018, and it will provide the tenant with just a little bit more time to be within the initial lease term, which would then expire in 2023. We also have the income source on which is based for our tenant. So the tenant pays us a portion of the gross sales of events. And so with that, in year 1, there was no rent that was paid. In year 2, it was 2.5% of the gross sales. And then years 3 through 5, there's a 5% rent that is due. Well, there is a rent and a tax cap that unfortunately prevents us from passing through some additional items, property taxes, and then also maintenance that we'll get into there. And we want to remove that cap, which allows for us to then recoup some of our carrying costs. And then the number 5 here, we're looking at the renewal rates and the renewal terms. Basically, there's the original lease called for first renewal, which was 5 years automatic. And then there was a second renewal that was also automatic for 5 years. Well, that original renewal date would extend beyond the life of the CRA. And so we just wanted to correct that and get within the life of the CRA to ensure that we didn't have any agreements that went beyond that life, the life of the Midtown CRA. So we have the first renewal, 5 years, and then there's a second renewal, which is a 3-year, but that second renewal will ultimately be at market rate. And then again, the office use was not specified. This office use for the collective was not included in the initial lease, and so we are going to include that. Then there's also a maintenance provision Currently, the CRA, the lessee is responsible for the first $500 of repairs, and we had a private maintenance provider that was providing these services to us, and it was just something that we couldn't continue to do, and so we wanted to have an efficiency here where we cut those costs, and we started to work with our facilities maintenance team to provide these services, and we looked at what were popular needs maintenance-wise and the items that our facilities team recommended as regular maintenance. And so we'll adopt a regular maintenance schedule for the facility. We'll have our city facilities team providing those services and treat it as it would any other city facility. Well, the tenant would be responsible for a per square foot price for that maintenance, which will ultimately equate to about $1,250 a month. Okay. And then the last item, which is the item that I think most of the board members initially had some reservations about, is the leasehold improvements. And as the assistant city attorney mentioned, the tenant was seeking some leasehold improvements with the addendum, about $103,000 for a combination of lighting and some electrical rewiring, stage lighting and projectors and sound equipment to really help. I think the tenant is looking at what the market will be going forward. It's not just a wedding venue, and she's looking to capture a different marketplace in order to be able to generate some additional revenues. And so when we looked at this, we said, okay, well, if you generate more revenue, we generate more revenue. And then if ultimately we adopt the addendum, then that lease cap is removed. And that percentage cap is ultimately removed, and then we'll generate more revenue based upon the dollars earned from the tenant. So again, about $100,000 in improvements. And the way we'll break out that $100,000 so that the CRA will pay for the partition to separate House 820 from the art space artifact. Right now, you can essentially walk right through House 820, which could be it could be a suit and tie, tuxedo event, very formal, and we could have artists coming through the space in shorts and a t-shirt, where you've got the mutual restroom that is shared between the two tenants. And so what we'll do is just provide a little bit of barrier there so that it prevents folks from intruding in that event space. And I think it is I won't say it's a design flaw, but it's not prudent for us to add additional restrooms to the building, and it's pretty cost prohibitive. So the partition is the lesser of two evils. But again, the CRA would pay that $25,000 for the additional leasehold improvements. We would provide the tenant with a 0% interest loan for $75,000. That the terms of that would commence on the 1st of 2021. And the breakout for that repayment would be the tenant is asked to kind of ramp up the repayment. So for the first 12 months of the lease term, the tenant will be allowed to, on top of the base rent and the addition, for the first 12 months. And then thereafter, there'll be 78 months remaining of payments, approximately $771. So that would take us through the first renewal, and then it would take us to the current lease term and then the first renewal, which approximately 90 months, give or take. And so at the end of that 90 months, the tenant would have another $10,000 remaining. So she will have made $65,000 in repayments to the CRA. So that balloon payment will be due in August of 2028. And then that $10,000 could be offset should the tenant embark on some improvements to the courtyard, which is something that she's expressed interest in doing. And so we've estimated that the infrastructure and some of the irrigation improvements associated with this would absolutely exceed the $10,000 that she would have outstanding. And so that's something that the tenant you can't take it with you when you leave. And so, that would be an improvement that we would benefit from going forward. Therefore, we would look for that $10,000 to potentially be offset should she embark upon those improvements. And just to give you an indication of what the base rent payments are currently like, and then what they could jump to. And so this is why we're also allowing that ramp up. The tenant's base lease payment is approximately $1,666. And this includes, this is an average of those gross revenues plus what we have as a management fee of about $400 a month. This is not the total that the tenant pays. She also pays for her own utilities and sales taxes, which aren't included here, but those are general pass-throughs just from the operations. So what we're looking at is with the initial 12 months, as previously mentioned, that repayment would jump to about $4,484. And the reason for this is because, again, we can now fully pass through the property taxes and the maintenance cost of operating that facility. The full cost of these items would go to the tenant, and so we would be able to reduce our operating expenses. And then subsequently, 78 months when it jumps up. And keep in mind, this is just a base lease number. Ideally, the revenues shoot up, and then we start to recoup some additional dollars here. So we're looking at really improving the situation here, where the tenant was paying 10% of market, and we're jumping up here and tripling the rent here within a year or so. So, and then we're just looking for some approval of this as presented to you all. I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. That was very informative. I know it answered a lot of questions for me. I do have a question. Is it at the last term when the lease expires at the end of the 8th year? Is it an option for us to maintain that 7.5%, or as a participation clause, or do we have to go with the market rent?
Well, it does say that we have the option to go to market, Commissioner. I would say that if the 7.5% is below market.
Well, I know a friend of mine does a wedding venue. They do about $2 million a year, and that would generate $150,000 a year, which is going to be over $10,000 a month.
Yes, sir.
And I foresee her that she could very easily do that if in the future. But of course, market rent out in that area is pretty stout anyway. But it might exceed that. I'm not quite sure. It was just a question I had. I can't. We market your thing is up on the screen, so I can't see if anybody's got questions. Somebody's got to speak up if they do.
Let me try to stop sharing screen here.
There we go. I can see everyone. Commissioner Walker.
Well, thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Drumgo, as far as the petition, and I'm like, I guess the comment is pretty similar to what you made about the petition that separates the two property occupants there. I too, wondered why there was never a separation, and the cost as you share for the petition, I thought, rather than the number, I thought, what kind of petition is this going to be? And would there be enough, based on what I guess you plan on doing and the cost analysis or the cost that you have put there, is it going to be enough to do what we really want to have this for, separating into two entities? Can you speak more about that, please?
Yes, sir. We had an architect, the architect that originally helped us with the renovation of the building, come through, and our facilities maintenance team, Fiorella's not on with us this morning, but she's been very just on top of these types of items. And so we've got high ceilings in the building, and, we'll have to tie in there. And then also there are some, I'll say it's a glass, kind of a glass entrance way that we would have to install there as well to separate those spaces. So we do think that $25,000 can accomplish what we're achieving. She's given us the quotes on this, and we got that directly from one of the contractors on continuing contracts with the city.
So, man, you're correct, Dan. And we know the petition will be there, but it'd be something I think would be more, I call admirable for what we wanted to look like, the appearance. You know,
Yes.
be something thrown up to say, okay, we got a separation.
Yes, sir. It's architecturally aligned with the feel of the space. You know, we're not trying to do anything that'll, nothing too extensive, but at the same time, it's very tasteful.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Lisa, I have another question. I know, I can't remember, was it $70,000 we appropriated not long ago to fix the water problem? Has that been finalized and taken care of as of date?
So we are currently undertaking those waterproofing measures. About $155,000 was that approved amount, sir.
Commissioner Franklin, do you have any questions? Appears as though not. There again, I guess this kind of slowed her down a little bit due to somebody else has raised their hand. I see. Oh, there you go.
Mayor Motz has a question.
I'm sorry, I was looking down, not looking up. Thank you, Mayor.
I'm sorry, sir. Well, and unofficially not part of the committee, but I really wanted to compliment the CRA on a difficult property, because I think what is being done in these transitions, and there are a lot of them, and we have to remember early on, this was a property that really helped made the whole area possible. It was the first, high risk entity that we did. I didn't think a use space, it was appropriate for what was done at that time. This makes this building rentable to future tenants. There's nothing that I'm encouraging House 820 not to be that tenant, but now we have a space that really, when this is completed and the leasehold improvements remain, which is important to us as the landlord, really becomes very, very useful. And so I really want to highly compliment the CRA on that. At least I think you did a great job.
Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mayor.
In line with, again, thank you, Mr. Chair, but in line with the mayor saying, I would agree. I think, looking at that part of our city and what we knew we were trying to make happen, and of course, it's prior to what we call our current commission now, but I think it's very well done. But I oftentimes wonder, and I don't know, maybe you're going to ask this, Mr. Drumgo, do you feel that it gets the, I would say the use, maybe for lack of a better word, of all our citizens? I know it's a rental facility. I get that. But do you think you're seeing a very well mix of our different citizens and residents in our city using that facility?
Well, I'll say that the diversification of the space is not just with House's presence. I think that Yard on Mass and the work of the folks who are within the bakery as well. I think that's where you see some additional participation from the locals, where folks kind of come out and they work in those spaces too. So it's a melting pot of space there in Mass Market, and we've got some additional work to do. And I think that that's what, if anything, this kind of highlights that, we start in one direction, and sometimes the businesses need to adjust. And so, we're here to support that, but then also we've got space to bring in other folks into this particular area. And so, we're excited to be able to do that. And I think we'll continue to diversify what we all call Mass Market.
Do I see any other questions here? If anybody else got what they put in 2 cents or take out 4? With that, there again, I think it's been I'm glad to see she's survived this brief little interlude of difficulty we've had with participation and social distancing, and I wish her the best. And again, I'm glad the CRA is doing some different things. Of course, I like to see the Catapult group be moving forward, and of course, there again, I like that we could give them some cheaper rent than she could find anything else in a great facility to put a nail in that area to get things started also. But would I hear a motion from anyone?
Motion to approve.
Got a second from Commissioner, got a motion from Commissioner Walker and a second from Commissioner Franklin. All those in favor, would you please raise your right hand to the screen so we can see it? It passes unanimously. I don't think there's anything else to be addressed today, and we will adjourn our meeting at approximately a long one today, about 8:43.
Mr. Mayor, you're still muted.
Yeah.
Okay. You had a lot of content in that today, Commissioner Reed, so we thank you for getting us through that. And that allows us to move right into our agenda study, which begins, which that meeting was scheduled for 8:30. And since it's 8:45, we're past, we'd have to hurry to do that. So we will see that we open our meeting on Monday with, at 3 o'clock with the Florida League of Cities Home Rule Hero Award for Commissioner Walker, which is going to be a fun presentation to be able to be made. And then our proclamation annually for Juneteenth Day at the same time. We will then look at the committee reports, which will be the two that we've just discussed. And that will take us then to our approval of the consent agenda. And so looking at the asterisks on the consent agenda, that would take us to our finance director's appropriation first beyond the minutes, 7A. And I'm going to assume I'm looking for a finance department person to discuss that appropriation. Or if you don't have any questions, and these are the normal kinds of appropriations.
Deidre, I'm here.
Oh, Deidre, I'm sorry, did not see you. So are there any questions on that appropriation? Is it all right to leave that on the consent agenda from your perspectives? Thumbs up if so. Okay. Thank you, Deidre, for your presence. And that brings us then to the miscellaneous, sorry, item 8C for the miscellaneous reports. And Ramona, I assume that is you to discuss?
Yeah. The first item there on that was on consent is an agreement with Industrial Flow Dynamics. This is for the replacement of 2 HRSG expansion joints for Unit 5. They're in need of replacement due to exposure to the elements and the temperature and pressure changes. They have impacted the performance of Unit 5. That, in accordance with that, the purchasing department issued an invitation to bid for the replacement of those joints. Industrial Airflow Dynamics submitted the lowest bid at $75,000, and upon evaluation by staff, they were selected as the most responsible bidder. The work will be completed during the scheduled fall 2020 outage, and this is included in Lakeland Electric's FY20 budget. And again, it's a $75,000 cost.
Are there any questions on that from commissioners? Is that all right to leave on the consent agenda? We'll also, okay, good. And we will also have an opportunity to hear about that. Well, actually, do we have utility committee meeting Monday? We don't, do we?
No.
No. So if you have any questions, this is the right time on that. All right. Seeing none, so we will leave the consent agenda as the items indicate, and that will take us for requests to hear from the general public, which will be Beverly Boatwright, president of the Washington Park Rochelle High School Alumni Association, regarding scholarship awards. There are no equalization hearings, and that brings us to public hearings. Ordinance is 1. City Attorney Davis, if you could cover that.
Thank you. We have 2 ordinances for second reading and a final vote. The first is the daycare on Carlton Street in the Florida Holiness campground area of the city. And I believe Teresa has the presentation with the maps again, if you need to see those.
Good morning. Again, this request is to allow for a preschool at 220 Carlton Street. This was the former group home that was operated by the Alliance for Independence. And the request is for a preschool to accommodate 104 students. particular request is traffic and also parking and impacts to the surrounding neighborhood. However, with the site plan that has been provided by the applicant, let me bring that up here. The applicant is proposing to accommodate enough spaces for the 104 students, provided that they are able to obtain a parking adjustment through the site plan review process. That adjustment would be based upon their ability to demonstrate that they are meeting one of several criteria within the Land Development Code that allows for such reductions. And this includes such things as tree preservation, proximity to transit, or the provision of a bicycle rack. So if they are able to meet the parking, we don't see any impacts in terms of transportation concurrency. It would be more operational issues that we would be concerned about if they were not able to achieve the number of parking spaces that are required.
You're muted again.
Are there any questions by commissioners? Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. I walked over that site the other day. Teresa, I think when the group home was there, they had 8, 12 people living there. Do you know?
The approval was for up to 10 persons, I believe, with the current approval.
I knew it wasn't a very large number. There again, we did some expansion of the Montessori over in my neighborhood for the school, and since that point, the traffic's just they're stacked up all along the road, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be here Monday, and so somebody's going to have to do my report for me on the real estate component, but I would vote against this. I think with the on-street parking and the way they're going to reconstruct, it's going to be a nightmare. I drove all the way around the back. You could drive through the back now, run that down circles, the driveway and stuff. And I would encourage each of you to go out and look at that site in the morning. I think it's going to be a quagmire on that street. There's a red light up at the end of, that's Hillsborough, that's Carlton Street, I'm sorry.
This is Carlton, but you're correct. There is a light at Hillsborough, and as noted,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And as noted in the report, there are going to be some improvements made to South Florida Avenue within the vicinity of this project, including the installation of a median that would then, for the most part, force traffic to come in at the light at Hillsborough if they were headed southbound.
When is that project going to start?
Chuck, are you on that you can respond to that question?
That project is scheduled to start later this year. So I think latest I've heard from DOT, it would be in the fall.
I guess it's not going to start till after the diet is completed, because it'd be a real mess getting those both going at the same time, because they're going to have the same effect somewhat.
I think as the timing works out, it would be after the road diet construction is completed.
Thank you.
One of the benefits too of this location is that there are multiple ways to get Florida Avenue into Cleveland Heights. Whereas, Commissioner, I know we've had the same concerns with the Montessori school up on Lake Parker Drive. Up there, it's pretty limited in terms of the ingress and egress routes. Here, there's some opportunities to better distribute traffic around to the surrounding network. So, from an overall network standpoint, that's why this would seem to work out fine.
And I'd also point out that there is a good amount of queuing available on site as the vehicles come in off of Hilltop. So I'd say there's probably at least 15 cars that could be queued up in that driveway, in addition to the parking spaces that are provided.
Are there any other commissioner questions? Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. hearing, I guess, what was shared by Commissioner Reed, I just want to make sure I'm hearing from staff, especially our transportation guru, Mr. Barnby, and then of course Ms. Mayo. Hearing what he suggests, what he's saying or have said, and knowing what I guess challenge that we do have there on North Lake Parker, then with the Montessori school expansion. Do you believe what has been planned and the concerns I think you all might have had, and now with the layout would help support transportation situation to be fluid?
I would say that, based on the network that surrounds the site, the layout that's been proposed by the applicant, and the fact that the pickup and drop off times are fairly spread out, that this site and this proposal wouldn't have a negative impact on the traffic in the area. I think it's really important to note that the way the school would operate, is that there's some substantial windows of time for drop-off and pickup activities to occur. So it wouldn't be like a regular traditional school where everything happens within a 15 or 30-minute period. It's spread out enough where there would be a lot of cars coming in and out of the site on a daily basis, but it's spread out so that the network could accommodate that traffic distribution. So that's the operations of the site are really key to making this work.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and Commissioner, I would add too that
Sure.
I was going to note that as we approached the public hearing, we did have neighbors actually in support of the project. And it was only, 2 emails that we had received that were noting concerns about traffic.
Commissioner McCullough, you have a question? Kind of looks like to me you might.
Well, she answered. I was just going to ask about the neighbors' support of it. So Teresa just answered it. Thank you.
Great. Any others? Commissioners? I drove that site as well, Commissioner Reed, and I think it matters a lot that the neighbors are in support, because I hear your concerns, and yet I also, hopefully that 15-car queue keeps that from being an issue going. So if there's no other questions, then I think we move on to the next item.
The next item is a request for planned unit development zoning on a property at 108 Lake Hunter Drive to add up to 24 multi-family dwelling units. Teresa, you want to show some maps for that?
Yes, so this again is the property oriented north-south. There is a good portion of the property that is submerged lands. However, the density on this property is based upon the upland area, the developable area, plus some of the right-of-way, which would yield a total of 104 units. This is just showing the pattern of zoning in the area. So the majority of the zoning is multifamily or two-family, which is duplex zoning. And that's important to note because under the current zoning, they would have the right to develop a 20-unit multifamily development at a maximum height of 55 feet. And the request here is for the 24 units and a maximum height of 40 feet is being requested, or 3 stories. And these are the building elevations. We did have some concerns expressed by nearby residents in the Dixieland neighborhood following the hearing, and their concerns were primarily related to security and crime. They did also have some concerns about traffic and noise, but as you read through the staff recommendation, the trip generation of this project is relatively low and wouldn't create any concurrency deficiencies. The perception of crime and noise because of this being a multifamily development could be based upon some past history in the area, but the project is surrounded by other multifamily developments. And again, by right today, they could develop an apartment building without having the conditions that are being placed through this request.
Any questions by commissioners? We talked a little bit about this one at the last meeting, so I think we're probably pretty good. All right. Next item.
Okay, the next item is a proposed development agreement with LCP Owner LLC related to what's commonly known as the Lakeland Central Park property and development, which is north and east of the Polk Parkway, west of Airport Road, and south of Old Tampa Highway. This is the second of 2 required public hearings, so there'll be a final vote on this on Monday. And what this development agreement does is the developer of this property has agreed to construct a spine road between Old Tampa Highway and Airport Road to control the project traffic. They will also be making a $1 million contribution on or before October 9th of this year for improvements at US 92 and County Line Road, and possibly also it would go to the US 92 Wabash Avenue intersection improvements. In exchange for that, they are granted transportation concurrency vesting for the uses that you can see in the table in the agenda memo, and that would be vesting for 5 million square feet of warehouse, 300 units of multifamily residential, 180,000 square feet of retail commercial uses, 200,000 square feet of office uses, and 125 hotel rooms. The development agreement allows for those, has a conversion matrix, which allows the developer to exchange some of those uses for other uses. And so that some of those quantities could change, but the agreement states nonetheless that the amount of warehouse use is capped absolutely at 5 million square feet. Chuck, do you have anything to add to that?
The only thing to add at this point, we've received questions from 2 nearby residents in the Lakes of Laurel Highlands. I think their general concerns, of course, is traffic and compatibility with the residential community. One of the things that I've stressed in my responses is that the frontage along Airport Road is slated for more retail type uses. And of course, there's, their buffering and signage and other requirements that are already in the PUD zoning ordinance that should help with those issues. One of the residents that has contacted us also had concerns about environmental impacts on the west side of Airport Road. Of course, that's not really related to the development agreement, but it's something that I conveyed to the gentleman that is something that is addressed in the zoning document. So, I think there's really been no other development since we last talked about this 2 weeks ago.
Are there any other questions by commissioners? I see Commissioner Reed. Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay. Yes, I had some initial concerns, and I had some lengthy dialogue with their attorney, Mr. Campbell, and I'm somewhat satisfied now because the Spine Road, I had concerns about the traffic on Drainfield Road, but now that the Spine Road is going to come in from the north and go toward the south, and I understand that's not going to dissect Airport Road until sometime later. That I think it'll give a chance for most of the traffic to feed on the New Tampa Highway and go to County Line Road or Airport Road North and then go into I-4. So my concerns have been squashed for the present time unless it gets worse when the Spine Road goes on out to Airport Road and it gets built out probably 20 years from now.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Reed. Any other questions from commissioners? All right. then I think that is it on your items, is it not, sir?
That's correct. I think city manager's coming up next.
All right, so because we go past, there you go, city manager. I'm sorry, I have to pull the screen for 5A.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 5A is related to our successor collective bargaining agreement with the International Association of Firefighters. They're local. I would like to ask Sean Chiraus, who is Deputy City Manager and the leader in the negotiations from the city manager's point of view, to go ahead and present this item to you, since he probably has more answers than I do as far as how the negotiations went. So, Sean, if you're prepared.
Yes, Tony, thank you, and good morning, commissioners. It's a great pleasure for me to present this item this morning because, as you are all aware, it has taken us over 15 months to get to this point. Since February 2019, representatives from the city and the International Association of Firefighters, or the IAFF Local 4173, have been actively negotiating successor collective bargaining agreements between the city and the IAFF. The IAFF represents all full-time, regular, certified employees of the city of Lakeland working only for the Lakeland Fire Department in the job classifications of firefighter, EMT, paramedic, driver engineer, and lieutenants. The agreement is actually two separate agreements. The first agreement applies respectively to firefighters and driver engineers, and the second agreement applies specifically to lieutenants only, though I can tell you that both contracts, for the most part, mirror one another. Both of those agreements expired in September 2019. The proposed amendments represent the conclusion of the negotiation process, resulting in successor agreements that were recently ratified by the respective Lakeland IAFF membership and now await final consideration by the City Commission on Monday. Although not exhaustive of the modifications to the agreement, I'm going to present the most substantive changes that are the result of the negotiations. First of all, the parties have agreed to a 3-year agreement commencing October 1, 2019 and expiring on September 30th, 2022. Now, it's important to note that this agreement begins October 1st of 2019, which includes fiscal year 2020. So in a few moments, when I talk about the pay and the wage article, it will apply to fiscal year 2020, because as we all know, we are now over a year behind in getting to this agreement. The agreement will provide for specific economic implementations in fiscal year 2020, 2021, and 2022. There is a modification to Article 22, which is the education article, and it will provide for tuition reimbursement that shall be equal with the established tuition reimbursement for any individual employee eligible for the City of Lakeland tuition reimbursement and educational assistance policy. This replaces previous language that established a maximum reimbursement amount specific to the IAFF agreement, and now it ensures consistency with the reimbursement amount provided to the general employees. What happened in this particular article in the past is at one point in time, the IAFF actually, through their contract, received a higher level amount for tuition reimbursement. In a later contract, then the general employees amount changed and became more than what was stated in the contract. So the firefighters were receiving less in tuition reimbursement. The way the language in the agreement has been crafted now is the two will mirror each other. If the amount that's received by the general employees changes, then it would also apply to the firefighters that are subject to the agreement. Another modification to the agreement comes in Article 24, which is the article related to observation of holidays. And this modification will provide that any shift employee who is hired back for overtime on an observed holiday, they shall be paid at 2 times, so double time, the regular hourly rate for time to work. It's just important to note there that firefighters that are working on an observed holiday as part of their regular schedule, this would not apply. This provision for double time only applies to those who were not scheduled but have been called back to work overtime. They would be the only ones receiving 2 times the regularly hourly rate if in that situation. Another modification then, and one of the more important ones, is Article 29, which is pay and benefits. We usually refer to that as the wage article. This would become effective upon approval of the agreement. The following provisions would apply and go into effect with the Commission's approval. For year 1, which as I discussed is really fiscal year 2020, so it would retro back to October 1st of 2019. The agreement calls for all members of the IAFF to receive an across-the-board increase of 2%, and also a 2.5% merit increase would be given to all of those bargaining unit members who received an acceptable performance review during their normally scheduled review cycle. And the only exception would be for any firefighters who are topped out or are at the top of the pay scale. If you'll recall, the 2% ATB and the 2.5% merit increase is the same as what the general employees received in October 2019. In year 2 of the agreement, which would be fiscal year 2021, basically what the agreement calls for is what we call a Me Too clause. The members of the IAFF have agreed that for fiscal year 2021, they would accept the same as what the Commission approved for both the across-the-board increases and for the merit increases. Again, the only exclusion would be for those who are at the top of their pay range, and it would also require a successful performance review in order for them to receive whatever merit increase is approved for 2021. In fiscal year 2022, which would be the 3rd year of the agreement, both parties have agreed to establish a collective bargaining reopener to discuss wages only for fiscal year 2022. That completes the changes, amendments that would be related to the pay and benefits or the wage article. Another modification to the agreement would be to Article 31, which is the health benefits article. And this would provide for annual firefighter physicals to be conducted through LifeScan wellness centers specifically at a maximum cost of $400 per member. Now, it's important to note there that the $400 per member, the city would not actually realize the full $400 as an increase because previously those annual firefighter physicals were being conducted through Health Stat Services at a cost of about $295 per physical. So while it is an increase to $400, this was a very important item for the members of the IAFF and our firefighters because they believe that this particular type of LifeScan service and the physical that is provided will help ensure their health and safety, as well as provide some health and safety to their family members that they go home to each and every day. It is recommended that the City Commission would approve the proposed successor collective bargaining agreements and authorize the appropriate city officials to execute the associated documents between the City of Lakeland and the International Association of Firefighters Local 4173, again, representing firefighters, driver engineers, and lieutenants, respectively. I'd also just like to take a moment to thank the members of the IAFF. I think we can all agree that our men and women down at the fire department have been the ones who have been probably most exposed from our city work family as related to the COVID-19 emergency. And so for the IAF membership to continue to work with the city to reach what is a very reasonable agreement here is a credit to them. And it's been a great pleasure to sit at the negotiation table and work with each one of them. With that, that completes my presentation, but I will certainly stand for any comments or questions.
Questions from commissioners? And great work on that. Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Sean, for the update and for your work, the representatives from our firefighters and their willingness to stay at the table. And I just wonder if are there issues that remain on their radar that you expect would come back up in the next round of negotiations that maybe we weren't able to get there this time, but that are important to them just for us to be mindful of as we look to future years?
Yes, Commissioner McLeod, there were some items, and like it's typical with any negotiation, there is some give and take, and there were some areas where the city, was able to give, and other areas where we weren't when we were looking at the total cost of the increases that would be applied because of the contract. But there are certainly some other areas that we expect to discuss in the future with the IAFF. To give you maybe just one specific example of a request that we did not meet, although we did meet some others to offset that, there was some discussions about what they call write-up pay or step-up pay, where you have a firefighter who for a period of time, sometimes even, for just a day or maybe even for half a shift, they will step up to a position that's higher in the classification system than what they're currently classified as. And when that happens, they receive a specific percentage increase during the time that they're stepping up to the higher level. There was a request for a higher percentage on that, and we were not able to meet that at this time. That additional cost, when we studied it, would have added about another $40,000 of cost to the contract. And so instead, we were able to apply that amount of increase to the other areas that I think were maybe more important to them in this negotiation, like the provision of the life scan services for their annual physical fitness. There were other areas, I think in year 3, as laid out in the contract, when we go back to look at wages, I think what we'll see happen is similar to what has been presented to the commission before, where we will probably need to do a market study to see how we compare. Right now, we think we're very competitive, but in the third year of this contract, by the time we get to 2022, we may need to take a look at that.
Great question. Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this may not be the proper time, I guess, but I want to make sure I don't forget. And again, thank you, Deputy City Manager Sherrouse, for such detailed information, and especially so, rightfully so, I would say, since it's been going on for, since 2019. But we also have another situation somewhat similar with the police department. And I just want to ask, maybe at the end of our agenda here now, could you give us some kind of information about where is that? What's happening with that collective bargaining agreement at this time? If Mr. Mayor would think there'll be a better time to address that.
Mr. Sherrouse, do you want to give a brief update?
Yes, sir. We have continued to negotiate with the PBA that represents our folks and members of the Lakeland Police Department. We actually had a meeting with them just a week ago, though it was a smaller meeting than what we have experienced throughout this process. The city has been able to adjust our offer that was initially made, and there have been adjustments along the way, but we've been able, because of that market study that you all are aware of, we can see where we could provide a market adjustment in the third year of the contract, and so we've had discussions about that. Earlier this week, actually, I was contacted by the lead negotiator from the PBA, and have been informed that the PBA agreement, similar to what I just discussed with fire, the PBA agreement is really 3 separate agreements. There's one for police officers, there's one for sergeants, and there's one for lieutenants. I was notified earlier this week that the lieutenants have actually voted and ratified the contract as the city has proposed. And so we're moving into the final steps of that. Over the last couple of days, we've been working to actually make the amendments to the physical contract so that it can hopefully potentially be presented to the City Commission at our next meeting. I don't want to create any future confusion and say that we've crossed the finish line, because we certainly haven't. But it does seem very positive that we had a ratification vote, at least from the lieutenants, on the proposed contract. So more to come on that, but we're gaining ground, and we're still hard at it, working with the folks, the men and women at the police department, to try to reach an agreement as soon as possible.
Well, thank you, sir, for the update. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to ask and get that kind of information, because I think it's important that we know what's happening, not just only, fire as we know, but the PD as well, because we know it's been some time as well for that particular agreement to be not ratified. So I appreciate the hard work that's been done, Mr. Sorrells, with your team, and thank you, Mr. Delgado, as well. And so make sure let's get through the finish line. Thank you.
Yes, it's wonderful to be able to work on this particular fire department contract, Commissioner Walker, but we also look forward as a commission to being able to ratify that PBA contract too, as you know, and are working on. All right, any other questions by commissioners on this? All right. So that takes us forward to.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The second item is a change order to construct to the construction contract with Cobb Site Development for the reconstruction and rehabilitation of Taxiway H at the airport. As you know, we previously received approvals to execute grant agreements for from both the Federal Aviation Administration and the Florida Department of Transportation for this project. The construction effort included a partial and full depth removal of approximately 6,400 linear feet of taxiways at varying widths. It also included the widening of Taxiway H by the Western T hangars, opening 2 additional plots for lease and development that would support future corporate jet activity, as well as the rehabilitation of concrete by the existing T hangars. All the construction work has been completed, and all the contract line items quantities have been reconciled based upon the work that has been completed. This change order in the amount of $55,001.57 incorporates all the quantity reconcilements and closes out the project. The additional costs are primarily due to the increased work related to the electrical components and additional concrete removal by the entrances to those T hangars. So it is being recommended that the City Commission authorize the appropriate city officials on Monday to execute this change order with Cobb Site Development in the amount of $55,001.57, increasing their contract fee to $2,646,178.82. And it's also being recommended that the necessary appropriations to accommodate this request by increasing the FAA's revenue by $42,509 and approving the appropriation of $55,002, with the airport share of being $12,493 be also approved. And Gene Conrad, I think, is on the line in case you have any questions.
Yes, Anna, are there any questions by commissioners for Mr. Conrad or City Manager Delgado? I think we all want to see that one done. Welcome back, Commissioner McCarley. And so, any other questions, and we will move on. Correct? Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, before we move from the city manager portion, just want to alert the public and obviously the City Commission that Monday's meeting will not be virtual. Monday's meeting will be in the chamber. Kevin Cook is already working on the social distancing protocols that are required. So for those who are interested in either attending or viewing, it'll be viewed once again back on our public information television networks. And obviously you can come to the meeting, though there will be social distancing protocols that you will need to go ahead and meet before you're allowed inside the building.
And that may take a little more time than normal. So please, if you're coming to the meeting, allow for that as you come along. It'll be nice to be back to normal in this opportunity to get together. All right. Now moving to, let's see, Utility 7-2, C2s, or I'm sorry, HC2.
We actually have one item under City Attorney Miscellaneous 6C1. which is a proportionate share agreement with Atlantic Property Company.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Related to transportation concurrency for the Riverstone development. I think several of you were around back in December of 2017 when the City Commission approved a development agreement with Atlantic Property for the development of this of Riverstone. This is a very large residential development south of West Pipkin Road. If you're familiar with where the Central Florida Aerospace Academy is, you take that road south across West Pipkin Road, and Riverstone is in that area. Under the development agreement that was entered into at the time, a number of transportation mitigation requirements were imposed, and one of those was that the developer make proportionate share payments for improvements to the intersection of Waring Road and Drainfield Road, as well as for the four-laning of Waring Road between Drainfield Road and Old Adela Road. And what this proportionate share agreement before you today does is address that requirement that was imposed on the developer back then. The developer has already placed into escrow their share of the cost for those two improvements that I mentioned. What they've done is place into escrow $1,402,475. Under a typical proportionate share agreement, they would make that payment. They would be granted transportation concurrency for their project and then receive impact fee credits for the amount of their payment. In this case, the two planned improvements are not ready to be designed or constructed yet. So what this proportionate share agreement is doing is moving us more into a typical pay-as-you-go type approach. As impact fees are coming in, being paid as lots are being built out in Riverstone, what this agreement will do is allow the developer to receive a refund out of the escrow fund in the amount of those paid impact fees. When that happens, though, they then are no longer entitled to impact fee credits for their project. The city will then, as with a normal development, retain the impact fees, and then use those for payment of the intersection improvements and other transportation improvements as they are ready to go. So this grants the developer transportation concurrency for 10,622 daily trips, 1,006 peak hour trips, and once again will allow them to take money out of the money that they've escrowed for those improvements as impact fee credits come in. I know Chuck Barbie, I'm sure, has a lot more to say about the timing of the intersection improvements and what's playing out in that area. Chuck.
Oh, thank you, Palmer. Probably the biggest, most imminent project out there is going to be the roundabout that's being designed now by DOT at the Waring-Drainfield intersection. The design and the right-of-way are in the current year of the DOT 5-year work program. The actual construction phase, though, is not programmed until fiscal year 2024. So from a capacity standpoint, the intersection is not committed capacity, so it would still fall, and that's why it still falls under this proportionate share agreement. The Waring Road corridor from Old Adela up to Drainfield Road, it's a county facility. The city conducted an alignment study that was adopted back in 2002 for a 4-lane improvement, really for the entire segment from Pipkin Road up to Drainfield. At this point in time, there are no design, right-of-way, or construction dollars allocated to Waring Road. So that's where, I think that's going to be a big focus of our coordination with the county once West Pipkin Road, that 4-lane project gets underway. To that project, West Pipkin Road, we had a meeting yesterday with the county. The right-of-way acquisition phase for that project should be completed sometime at the end of the calendar year. Construction is expected to begin in early 2021, hopefully after Sun and Fun is completed, and to be about a 2-year construction project. So there's a lot that's going on in this area. The proportionate share really does help address the critical gap or bottleneck in the Southwest area network. Part of the action that would be taken, if the prop share agreement is approved by the commission on Monday, an associated action would be to identify a specific line item in the CIP, the capital improvement plan, for Waring Road corridor improvements, and that's where the 1.4 million would be housed, and would help lead to future expenditures in that corridor. So that's really all I have at this point.
So are there any questions by commissioners? Commissioner Reed. Commissioner Reed, although it looks like you're talking, we can't hear you. Try. Did you touch the top of your earpiece at all? There's a little button on the very top. All right. Oh, how about there? We got you. Oh wait, it went away. Punch one more time, whatever you just did, Commissioner Reed, if you can. Can't hear you. No, and push towards the end. Can you try again, muting yourself and mute yourself and then remute on the screen? Why don't we try that? There we go. I think we have you.
Okay, can you? I guess they got it now. How's that?
Perfect.
I don't know what happened. I didn't hit the button. Chuck, was I understanding Park correctly that they're going to give up their impact fee rights? I mean, they're going to give up their credits right now. So in case Metro developed, they might lose concurrency.
In terms of Riverstone, really a key component here is to lock in concurrency. So Riverstone actually would be getting a permanent entitlement for those trips based on their proportionate share payment. In terms of the impact fee credits, those dollars are really already sitting in a separate escrow account. So what we would be doing through this agreement is drawing down that escrow that escrow payment. So it's really almost a reallocation of the city transportation impact fees that we'd be collecting anyway to a specific line item in the CIP. So this is a little bit of a different approach to addressing concurrency. To my knowledge, this is the first prop share agreement that we've actually ever considered and executed here in the city. This one has a couple of different moving parts, but concurrency would get locked in through build out for the project, and our impact fees would be formally allocated to the Waring Road corridor. And Metro would have to adopt a separate either development agreement or proportionate share agreement to address its concurrency mitigation requirements going forward.
Would we do that same type of document with them?
Yes, sir. In fact, we've had conversations with their development team and their legal counsel, giving them the documents from Riverstone as an example to use going forward with their development.
And we have enough capacity for concurrency for everybody out there?
That's right now. It does appear that we do. With the prop share agreement and the allocation of the funding for the Waring Road corridor, that in terms of Hawthorne Mills obligations and what they would be required to mitigate, really through statute at the state level, that the capacity would be there to support Hawthorne Mill, subject to transit funding, which is the same issue that we've been working on with Riverstone, and the completion of the Modelo Road extension and the internal road network to provide those connections between Pipkin and Ewell. So there's a lot of the same issues that we want to replicate with Metro or the Hawthorne Mill project going forward. But as you start to address the Pipkin corridor, the Waring corridor, and everything north and east, that those are being that there's capacity there as stated in Florida statute.
Thank you.
Other questions by commissioners? Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you. Chuck, you said this is the first proportionate share agreement that we've done as a city. I'm just curious, how did this come about? Did the developer come to us with this? Did we recognize this as a better arrangement? Can you just walk me through that?
Sure. Over the past couple of months, we've presented a couple different development agreement types to the commission. When Riverstone came forward for zoning approval about 3 years ago, we had a lot of the same concurrency, traffic mitigation issues for the network in Southwest Lakeland, and so we worked with the developer on an overarching development agreement, very similar to what we're talking about for Lakeland Central Park, that outlined what are the level of service failures, what are the going to be the payment or concurrency mitigation requirements going forward to provide vesting for Riverstone through build out. And within that development agreement, there was a specific requirement, and this was something that was suggested by Riverstone's legal counsel, to enter into a proportionate share agreement that actually formally handled the transfer of funds to the city. As the build out, I think the development of Riverstone happened a lot quicker than anybody anticipated. So as we started to figure out how to implement a proportionate share agreement that really enacted or implemented the development agreement, there were some challenges on how to handle the impact fee credits and the impact fees that had already been paid for really phases 1 and 2 of Riverstone. So that led to us really working with the development team on specific language to address their concerns and to really make it clearer for us to implement the impact fee collections and administrations moving forward with the project. So with Riverstone, there's, we don't like, certainly to make things too complicated, but we ended up in this instance having 2 layers of agreements. One that stated the intentions and the requirements to enter into subsequent agreements for the actual funding of the transportation mitigation requirements. It was a little complicated, but Riverstone, of course, is a very, very big project. And so there are multiple things that we needed to do to mitigate the project impacts and to keep them moving forward. Did that answer your questions?
Yes, it did. That was helpful. I was just curious how it originated, and so thank you.
I think the bottom line is that the city, this proportionate share agreement is revenue neutral from the city's perspective. We will always have access to the $1.4 million. It will either be in the form of impact fees collected to date, which we are banking, or the balance that's left in that escrow fund. I mean, the escrow fund balance goes down as the impact fees go up to the city. So we'll always have the net of $1.4 million available to us for these transportation improvements.
Okay, any other commissioner questions? Good question. All right, I think we are through with that item then for purposes of the agenda study. Thank you, Chuck, really appreciate that information very much. That's becoming a more complicated area all the time. Okay, so that ends these 6C1, and that takes us into 7C2.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have a task authorization with Teamwork Net Inc. This is for engineering services for the replacement or engineering design and replacement of 27 protective relays for Unit 5. The existing relays are aging. Most of them are over 20 years old, and they don't currently meet the manufacturer's digital standards. The old relays are analog design. In accordance with that, Teamwork will provide the services pursuant to a continuing contract that was approved in October of 2017. So all terms and conditions will be in accordance with that. The total not to exceed cost for services is $155,900, and that is included in Lakeland Electric's FY 2020 budget. Then once these protective relays are designed, they'll be installed during the fall 2020 outage.
And this is an existing supplier continuation because I don't see the RFPs, right?
Yes, sir. It's pursuant to a continuing contract.
Questions by commissioners? Okay, very good. The next item. On Ash Marketing with Separation Technologies. That's yours too, Ramona. I can't hear you, Ramona. All of a sudden, you were working and okay, there you go.
The last item we have is an Ash marketing agreement with Separation. Okay, sorry, you were cutting out. The last item that we have is an Ash marketing agreement with Separation Technologies, LLC. This is a short-term agreement with this particular vendor. We've had Separation Technologies providing the ash marketing or the byproduct marketing for another third-party vendor that will be participating and providing services, but Separation Technologies is needed to stay on for a few months in the interim to transition that work. So it's expected for 60 to 90 days. The effective date would be June, a retroactive effective date of June 1st, and that would contain the ability to terminate that agreement prior to that time upon 60 days of notice. And this is a revenue generating agreement for Lakeland Electric. We anticipate generating approximately $250,000
Are there any questions on this Ash agreement?
In revenue.
Okay. Are there any questions from commissioners? Oops. Are there questions from commissioners on Ash? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Ramona. Appreciate that very much. Which brings us to our audience portion of the meeting, which we'll observe. So not having an audience, that allows us to go to mayor and members of the city commission for any items you want to bring up. So who would like to begin? Commissioner McCarley.
I just want to congratulate the city and thank the Detroit Tigers and the city and the school district for hosting such flawless, in spite of weather, graduations the last few weeks. We watched 2 graduating classes last night here at our home to see a lot of friends for Lakeland and Harrison go through. And in spite of the weather and delays, I think the coming together of all the entities has really been good for the community. So I just want to say kudos to our staff for pulling that together. The school district, obviously, and the Tigers, because we could not have done it without everybody coming together. So thanks, Tony, and to all the group that managed that. It looked wet last night, but it flowed nicely.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's been wet almost every night. I know we've had a few delays almost every graduation, and the one day it was beautiful, we didn't have graduations. That was Sunday. But yes, thank you so much, Bob Donahue, his staff, Ron Myers, his staff, obviously Superintendent Byrd, and all the principals who made the decision to move forward have done a incredible job of maintaining social distancing while still having a wonderful graduation ceremony. And I don't know if the commissioners have been receiving them, but we've been getting letter after letter from principals and administrators from the schools. Very thankful and very happy about the way all the graduations have been going.
Excellent comment, Commissioner McCarley. Anything else? All right. Is there another commissioner that has something to share? I'm looking. I see none. Okay, then Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. echo what my dear sister shared, Commissioner McCauley. I think we all can be pleased with how efficient and how effective, I would say, the graduations have gone for our various high schools, and partnering with them, the school board, and as well as us as a city and the Tigers, of course, to make it happen. I'd like to just share with you on last evening, several of us were at the prep vigil in Mon Park. I don't know what the exact number might have been in attendance, but I know there were several hundreds in attendance. And I think we very well. As you all know, had been planned and organized by both Pastor Scott Thomas and Eddie Lake here, but you all know both those gentlemen, along with other pastors here and across the spectrum of our city. And just to see how many of our residents turned out on last evening, I thought it truly was a blessing to be able to come and share as those pastors did, and how well I think it was received, I would say, by the different ones that were there. Of course, it was announced on last evening as well that we will have our community forum on race relations coming up on the 29th of this month in the Yuki Theater at RP Funding Center. I understand our dear City Manager Delgado, along with you all as my colleagues, I guess, providing him information as how do we want or how we think that program should pan out. But I'm sure, as many of you all know, I think it's a time to listen to our residents, listen to our citizens about whatever their concerns may be. And you still have, I will say, several silos still doing things, as I understand, and you are probably aware of some different things that happen among our citizenry to help to still deal with what we believe is a much needed conversation. And of course, we would just kick off ourselves with what we're doing on the 29th of this month. So I want to make sure you all know I appreciate what you all do and how we do it. We're working together. It's unfortunate that we can't, talk about a lot of this stuff one-on-one, except for us being together like this, because it could lead to something that we need to vote on or appropriate something for. And of course, living under the sunshine makes it kind of challenging. But I want to let you know I appreciate what we're doing and how we're moving forward. And as I shared with a group the other night, we have to remember, as I say to all the citizens here in Lakeland, we'll continue to say, Lakeland is not Minneapolis, and Lakeland is not some other places maybe across our nation where we've seen some of the upheaval. But certainly, we know people have the right to share and give their comments or whatever the voice their, comments about what they feel and how they feel. And we certainly want to be able to hear that from them on that evening. Thank you.
Thank you for the update on that very much, and certainly agree and appreciate the comments. Any other commissioner comments? All right, it is 10:48. Our policy review starts at what time, City Manager Delgado? What did we have that slated for?
I think it starts like right now because we're past.
Okay. Do you want to take a 5-minute break is my question. No. All right. So we are going to continue right on in. Who wants to kick that off?
Well, Mr. Mayor, if I can, what the commission had asked during the last city commission meeting was to have an opportunity to talk with each other regarding the process associated with the acquisition of a new city manager following my retirement at the end of September. And so from a staff perspective, obviously we can work with the commission in any way that you would like us to work with, whether that be through an HR process, letting HR do the selection. But we did some background work Obviously, most other municipalities look to hire consultants if the commission is interested in doing a search. And we did some background work. Emily Colon, my assistant city manager, did a lot of research with a number of the consultants who currently work in that field. We found that the average cost of hiring a consultant, if this is the route you want to go, is around $30,000 to $35,000. And the time period it normally takes is anywhere between 90 and 150 days. 120 days seems to be the norm. Clearly, there's consultants that maybe can do it a little quicker. Some take a little bit more time, but they will handle all the vetting. They'll meet with you initially, individually, as well as a group, and then they'll handle all the vetting. If this is something you want to move down and have the city operate, obviously our HR department can immediately get with you and start putting together the proper information, solicitation pieces, and those type of things, which we've done in the past, and actually have done it for a number of the department head positions that we've hired over the years. But really, this is a time for you all to discuss what you would like to do next.
Very good. So, Commissioner Walker, kick off.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as we even shared, I think on our last time together, when the subject was brought up, I guess my colleagues know that I'm certainly in agreement, to make sure that we do what we think is best and proper, as we move along the way. And I would agree, because I think I was one of the ones that said something about looking at possibly, utilizing the route of having an interim city manager if we decide we want to go the route of having a consultant to be hired to take us through that process. But I would ask that we consider, even because we're talking about this is mid-June, end of June, before you know it, and again, I guess Tony be going before you know it as well, that maybe we consider, if we're going to go the route of going outside of our, to look for a person that would, to become a new city manager, that we definitely look at the possibility of having an interim from within. And I would like to see what my discussion regarding that right now as well.
Commissioner McCarley and then Commissioner Reed.
Well, as we talked about last week a little bit, and Commissioner Walker, I understand exactly where you're coming from, and that's why I really wanted to push if these consulting groups can work 90 to 120 days, I think that puts us in a sweet spot to kind of not have a lag time between Tony's retirement and then hiring someone. The deputy city manager and the assistant city manager do a lot of work right now. And I think if we decide we want to go with an outside source, which is what I would prefer to do, just because I think Lakeland is on the cusp of a lot of exciting things. I think that we have a great staff in place, but in addition, and I would highly recommend that they apply as well for this position, but I'd like to look nationally to see if we can make a jump for our expansion, and especially in response to COVID, to sort of have an idea of some experiences that we can seamlessly get back to normal, and that we can, help our economy. And it might be, for my perspective, an outside view of Lakeland, because I think Lakeland's a great place to live, work, and play. I think we might be able to recruit a really great candidate or candidates that actually might heighten our awareness, even if they're not hired, that we hear ideas from them in this process and we see what they've done in other cities, that if it does end up being an internal candidate, that it might be helpful for them as well to move forward. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just think the broader the net, the better it is for the city of Lakeland. And I think if the practice right now that Tony just alluded to, that the average days for a consulting firm to work is 120, I think that we're in that window. And additionally, I think if our HR department has solicited and done RFPs in the past for department heads, we can use that model probably to apply to this for the city management position as well. That would just be my recommended. I think a broader net cast is better for all of us in the city of Lakeland.
Commissioner Reed, go ahead, sir. Commissioner Reed. This is kind of like hide and seek. You were there a second ago, and then I think you disappeared. So while you're coming back, is there another commissioner comment? Commissioner Franklin.
Oh, Commissioner Reed's back there while he's working out. I'd echo Commissioner McCarley's comments.
All right.
I think, having been involved in a couple of the city hiring processes before, I've seen the benefit of bringing in those different ideas, and then I learned a lot from the candidates that ultimately weren't hired. But I think even with the people we landed on, it sharpened their whole focus on going into the job and what they were getting into. But as far as going outside, I have a lot of confidence in our internal staff, but I do think that this is hands down the most critical position in the city to fill. I mean, it's everything emanates. No offense, Mayor. You set the tone, but the city manager is running a staff of a couple thousand people, and it's really essential that we get that right. And, it would be wonderful if we went outside and we found that the best that we could possibly bring to the table already exists within our organization. It'd be nice to validate that. But I think we'll learn a lot in the process, and it'll bring people to the table we wouldn't otherwise see. So I would support going outside as well.
Good comments. Commissioner Reed.
Can you hear me now? Good. All right. Thank you. I don't know what's been happening to my machine today, but there again, I have some thoughts as well. There again, I think our succession process should be considered very strongly. There again, I'm not opposed to looking at some outside sources. Particularly, it's $30,000 to get a lot of outside information that might give us some insight into things that other people are doing. But I'm a firm believer of succession right here in the area, and so whatever we decide, I'm gonna probably give a lot of weight to our current situation with our internal employees. But it'll yet to be determined what's going to happen.
So your comment would be a combination of both a broader net as well as we'd learned some things in the process, even though your suspicion would be that you'd be internally motivated.
We might have it just to give them our succession internship per se, or temporary,
sure.
And then try them out for 3 months or something.
Sure. Commissioner Walker.
Well, thank you again, Mr. Mayor. And that's what I was, I guess, alluding to when I shared initially. And I'm not opposed to going outside. I wanted to hear what others were saying. That's why I put it out there like I did. But even at the time period, I think we're looking at 120 days. Yes, we will. You think about it's mid-June again, and 120 days would be the time well past, I believe, that our current city manager will be gone. So I'm looking at, again, based on what I'm hearing and you all say, looking at possibly having our interim for a time period while we still do what needs to be done. If we continue, if we vote to go that way with outside a search kind of a situation. So I lean toward that particular combination of the process as well. And if you want to hear where I would probably fall, thank you.
Commissioner McLeod. Thank you, Commissioner Walker.
Thank you. I would concur with Commissioners McCarley and Franklin, and I would like to see us move to do a national search and move quickly to go down that route. I think we may need to be prepared to have an interim if that time window closes on us and we're still in the middle of a search. I don't favor appointing an interim as a trial period. I think that becomes harder in many cases to appoint someone else. And I think we, as Commissioner Franklin said, that this is the most important, maybe one of the most important decisions we will make this year. And for our residents, we want to be able to say that we have found the best candidate. If that is an internal candidate, and I would, as other colleagues have said, encourage those who are already with the city who want to apply, I encourage them to do so. If that ends up being the right person, then we can say we have looked throughout the country and we're confident in this hire. But I'd like to see us move quickly on it because time is is moving fast. But that would be my desire, and I think we can get this process started and go forward, but also be prepared if we do have to appoint an interim if we need to.
Commissioner Madden, because you and I will be the last two to weigh in.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that my colleagues have said it all, and I am happy to go forward as soon as possible with the national search, and am happy to have our internal candidates apply as well to make it as competitive as possible to get the very best possible for our shining city that we want to be even brighter in the future.
And I will weigh in as well. So I think that's a unanimous decision then to make sure we start the engagement of search firm for that process. Commissioner Delgado.
Thank you for making me a commissioner. I appreciate that, sir.
I've done that before. I apologize. I was almost good on this whole call. City Manager Delgado, I apologize. And we're glad you're not interim, by the way, although in some respects you are.
Thank you. So I guess the last question regarding this is if we're going to go ahead and look for an outside search firm, I would like to appoint Emily Colon to lead that process with our team. I can tell you we're going to have to go out and do an RFP. Palmer would tell you that too. So obviously that might take about 30 days to acquire an outside search firm. I'll be working with Mike Brossard on the budget to go ahead and do that. And then they will ultimately want to come and meet with you individually and as a group to go ahead and kick that off. So that 90 to 120 might ultimately be 150. So understanding what you said, you should be prepared to, at least in some regards, have someone sitting interim while this continues. But obviously everybody understands that this will be a national search process. If you want city staff to do it, clearly they're going to spend the time to put together the solicitation pieces. We're going to want to meet with you once again individually to get some ideas of what to put in the solicitation pieces. It might advance the time period. However, most outside search firms, as you know, if any of you have worked with headhunting groups, they have rosters that they already work with. City staff won't have that, so it'll be a true open solicitation. So all we need from you is an understanding. Do you want us to start looking for an outside consultant, or do you want us to work internal?
I think the commission would be wanting to use an outside consultant. Let's do a thumbs up on that, if that's the case. Yes, that's a unanimous case. So,
okay, with that, but I'm going to ask the assistant city manager to start.
Can I ask one other question, which is, can we accelerate an RFP shorter than 30 days?
I'm going to ask Emily to go ahead and work with our purchasing department and see what we can go ahead and do. Emily, you're on the line. What are you thinking?
So this week I've talked to 6 different consulting firms to just kind of see what the market is, if COVID has impacted the time frame, what is an ideal time frame, ideal costs, and the full suite of services that we would ideally want. And everyone seemed to be pretty optimistic. The hard date that you don't want to, so when you think in terms of posting, so we get the RFP, and as soon as we sign a contract with whomever we're going to go forward with, some non-negotiable days, well, they are really, but what we wouldn't want to mess with is you're going to want to post the job for 30 days. And cast your net as wide as you can through the different state associations and ICMA. So 30 days, you don't really want to mess with that because you want to give people time to prep their application materials. And then if you think about that, then from the time that you guys will vet it down, you need to give, especially if people are traveling non-locally, they're going to need time to make travel arrangements with the understanding that these people are probably employed in high-level roles, that they can't just drop everything and run to Lakeland. So there is some timing that, depending upon who the candidates are and where they're traveling from, but they said typically you're going to want a 3-week window of notice before you have them on site. So, while you can speed up dates, it's probably not ideal with this level of a recruitment and, the candidates' responsibilities to the communities that they're currently serving if they're local government folks.
Mr. Mayor, with that, we can get started right away. And like I said, I'll ask Emily to go ahead and lead it.
Okay, very good. Any other comments for this workshop? All right. Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
I think Commissioner McLeod and Commissioner Walker both raised their hands, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I didn't see it, and I'm just getting that. Okay.
Commissioner McCarley was ahead of me. She had her hand up, so I'll.
Commissioner
Thank you,
McCarley,
Commissioner McLeod. Thanks. Emily, what you just said with those two non-negotiable timeframes, that's about 55 days right there. So 30 days posted, 3 weeks to have interviews. So that's right around 51 days or so. So if we can turn around an RFP in 30, then we're still looking at 80 something days. That's very fast. So I feel comfortable if we start on this immediately that we can maybe hit that window that we're looking at. I think, it might be workable.
The only other thing to consider is that the days that Tony alluded to earlier, that's till you get a contract with your next person. If they are not an internal candidate, they're going to have to give their respective communities 30 to 60 day notice, depending upon what their contract calls for. So I'm just putting this out there because I don't want it to be like, oh crap, we didn't think about that, or a shock. But there are parts of the recruitment that we can speed up. So while we're going out for an RFP, we know that they're just going to be creating a brochure, an advertisement brochure. Those are things that we can work on, and it's just, getting our stuff together. What do we want the job announcement to say? Because they're going to be coming in to our community asking these questions, and the recruitment firm is going to ask each of you, they'll meet with each of you one-on-one to say, what do you want in the next city manager? And that's something that you guys can, if you haven't thought about already, can be thinking about now, so you can answer those questions and we can tie it up quick.
Yeah. Thank you.
Commissioner McLeod and then Commissioner Walker.
Thank you. I just had it was a similar thought as yours, Mr. Mayor, about the RFP window, and it's not in the grand scheme a huge amount of time, but thinking, is it possible to issue the RFP and have a shorter response time than 30 days? If you've talked to 6 firms, I would imagine these firms are ready to respond. Is there a requirement that it has to be 30 days, or could we make it 21? Could we do 15? Can we just shave off a couple of weeks in the process by having a shorter response time on that RFP? That would be my desire if we can do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend a 30-day RFP, because this is what these companies do for a living. They have national searches all over the country, and they do this a lot. So, in talking with the 6 different firms, they just said, well, tell us a little about Lakeland. They're going to ask, different companies have different gauges to what they want to know to see if they want to bid on the job, really. And it's how long has your current city manager been there? What is the political climate, or what is your bond rating, or your cash reserves? Those are the different questions that the recruiters had asked me, just to give me, and of course, it just ballpark figure when we had conversations, so that they could give me a measure to give to you guys on how much we'd be thinking if we went out. So, and one company, actually, I talked to him yesterday morning, and by the end of the day, he had already had something in my email box kind of illustrated. So I don't imagine it's going to take too long for an RFP.
So why don't we make that our goal, about 15 days?
Okay.
Doable? All right, Commissioner Walker and then Commissioner.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I can concur, as I will, with my colleagues on making sure that we begin the process immediately. And so, of course, scale down as much as we can, but I'm old school. And I tell my children this all the time, it's not, this microwave society sometimes. But anyway, I want to make sure that we have done our part and done our due diligence to make sure, as I'm hearing Ms. Colon mention, we want to make sure if we're going to go outside, spend this kind of money to get the kind of candidates who want to apply, I want to make sure we give them time to give us what we want to have if we're going to do it and then do it the right way, of course, I'm sure we will. But the timing is there. I think it's so important, and not to if we can shorten some time, fine. I'm all for that, but I don't want us to rush so fast until we don't we may not hit a home run as we want to do in this process. That's my comment on that. And before you conclude the meeting today, Mr. Mayor, I want to make an announcement. Okay.
Very good. We'll do that. Commissioner Reed and then Franklin.
Thank you. Again, I concur with Philip. I'm not ready to sprint down this to the finish line. I think we need to do this slow and methodical and find that if we're going to look outside, I want to make sure we get the best person that's available. And maybe they may not be available. We still get them, you know. But I'm not going to rush. I don't want to rush.
Well, I think the only thing we're talking about accelerating this is the firms themselves. We certainly don't have to rush the presentation of the candidates from any one of those firms that we'd ultimately choose. Commissioner Franklin?
I agree with that sentiment too about not rushing, and I feel like I got to ask the question of Tony. Is there any possibility if this process delays that you could extend a little longer? And the reason I ask is, you know, this isn't a situation where you've been hired away by another community. It's a retirement deal. It is a very critical decision for us to make. We don't want to rush it. But I also agree, as some others have said, that I think it's very difficult to bring an interim in and then potentially go in a different direction. I think it's a very, very stressful culturally on the organization. And I just don't think it's fair to the staff. And I don't want to see us rush the process to create, I feel like we kind of have an artificial deadline that's been created here. And I'm disappointed in that. I wish we had more time to do it the way we know what needs to be done.
And City Manager Delgado, that can be a question you can say, let me think about it if you don't want to answer it.
Well, let me think about it would be best. I mean, obviously there's plans in place, and you're right. I'm not leaving for another position. That is not in the works. I have not been solicited, nor have I accepted any other position. This is really something that me and my family had talked about. We had set plans in motion, obviously related to the end of the fiscal year for obvious reasons. I will think about it, but right now we've got a few plans, and I appreciate exactly what Commissioner Franklin has said. It's not unusual, though. I will say this. It's not unusual that during processes you have interims. I suspect that if I didn't take the position when I did, and the City Commission were to have to do a search, and if you remember, at that time it was a 30-day turnaround because City Manager only gave the Commission 30 days. I would have been an interim for a period of time and understood that that I may not have been the candidate, nor if I didn't want to be the candidate, I would understand that I would end up going back to the second position. So I will think about it, but obviously at this point in time, me and my family have made some decisions and some plans, and so I would have to spend some time talking to my family.
So rather than to take a no, we'll let you have that time as your request. Commissioner McCarley.
Just one more thing on process. Tony, why would Emily be in charge of this and not HR? Why wouldn't we assign this to Mark?
Well, Mark would work with Emily in order to do that, but I really want somebody from this office to kind of spearhead it in order to make sure that everything that HR gets is related to a city manager's position. And
would that exclude her from applying if she so chose?
Not at all. Not at all. Obviously, all we're doing and all I'm asking Emily to do is to go ahead and work on the acquisition of the consultant.
Okay. I just don't want to, if we want to talk about the sustainability and the process internally, I also don't want to hinder anybody who might, not that Emily has said anything or anything like that, but I just want to be as cautious as possible if we're looking at internal candidates and external candidates that everybody has a viable chance. I wouldn't want to hinder anyone, just like I wouldn't necessarily want Sean to look at being in charge of the process if that would hinder him applying. So I just wanted to, that kind of worried me a little bit for a second.
No, matter of fact, I've been talking to Mark while this meeting has been going on, and he's prepared to go ahead and do the legwork. We just need to go ahead and get those contacts that Emily provided and make sure that we're meeting all of the information that's necessary that falls under city manager. Emily's got, I don't know if many of you know her background, but she's got a tremendous amount of background in FCCMA, ICMA, meeting with a lot of, going and spending a lot of time understanding the processes that city management would require. Matter of fact, she's going to be an adjunct professor next year. And so having her expertise, at least kickstarting it, would be very helpful.
And just to plug in, Joyce Dias, our risk management director, has, and Mark Rayford, our purchasing manager, have been emailing me that we would not have to go out for an RFP process to expedite it with the 35,000 threshold. With the quotes that I got, there was only one that was above. And so we could get quotes from them and then select it from there. So that process would be shrunk.
Wonderful.
So.
Wonderful. So everybody in favor of that being expedited? Okay. Commissioner Reed? All right. Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before we leave our meeting today, I want to make sure you're all probably aware and have read that we had an icon in our community of Polk County that passed away, and it's Ken Riley, NFL legend, we call him, here for our community called Polk County against Bartow, and he passed away, and his funeral is tomorrow. And because of the coattail, I guess, that he will draw for his service time on tomorrow, the services being, of course, at the RP Funding Center to utilize more space and have the social distancing involved. And, Ken played with Cincinnati Bengals during his time with the NFL, and of course been nominated for the Hall of Fame NFL, but hasn't yet to, I think, he's been put on a short list, I think, a couple of times, but never made it in there. But other Hall of Fames, of course, like Polk County and his alumni at Florida A&M University, and et cetera. So I want to make sure you all know that and keep the family in prayer. It was not expected. He had a massive heart attack at age 72. Thank you so very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, thank you for your time this morning. Mr. Cook, do you have anything you want to add?
I just want to say, I want to thank you all for being super patient with us during this impact of COVID and having virtual meetings. And this is a historic moment. This is our last one, as we will see you back in the City Commission chambers on Monday. We have a plan for social distancing. We have the dais set up. So we're ready to go. But just wanted to say thank you guys for working with us during this unprecedented time. Thank you.
Thank you for your fantastic work, Kevin and Michael. You can see those applauding hands, because you have made this as smooth as any other agency we have seen around us, certainly, and we have felt very, very connected through it. We've almost gotten like we're good at it, and but we'll look forward to being back together a lot. So appreciate that transition as well. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.